Good evening and welcome to a new edition of A Daily Debate. This evening we'll be delving into an issue which is raising quite a lot of concern, and that is the Islamist trend that will be prevailing in the upcoming Egyptian parliament. In the past, the West was always concerned about the presence of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egyptian political life. However, nowadays this has changed, and the tone of the West not only has it changed, but the growing fear is mostly from Egyptians who are concerned about how the Salafists, which are very strict in applying Islam, how will they manage business in Parliament will be under discussion in a few moments. But before we do so, we'll be delving into news making headlines. The counting has begun for the third phase, and it's worth noting the final phase in the Egyptian parliamentary elections. The head of the electoral committee councillor, the higher electoral committee councillor, Abdul Muazzez Ibrahim, said that the two-day elections have passed with a democratic, disciplined atmosphere, and that the final results of the third phase of the elections will be announced in a press conference this coming Saturday. And on the judicial front, the trial of the former President Hosni Mubarak, his two sons, and the former Minister of Interior and some of his assistants has resumed earlier in the day. The head of the five-member prosecution team said that the evidence, that they had strong evidence, the elements of participation, instigation, agreement and consolidation by the former President, former Minister of Interior Habib Al-Adli, and his associates were confirmed, including providing policemen with live ammunition to kill and frighten protesters. And still with the local scene, the Egyptian Premier, Dr. Kamal al-Ganzouri, said on Wednesday his government's main priorities was to achieve security and push forward the country economically. Speaking at a press conference, al-Ganzouri said the government was exerting its utmost efforts to increase revenues for the country, which would reflect on the ordinary Egyptian citizen. The Premier asserted that the government is adamant on doing its best, especially for low-income people who are direly awaiting such services. And elsewhere in the region, Mr. Nouri al-Maliki backed off threats to fire ministers by boycotting cabinet on Wednesday, as ministers belonging to the Iraqiyya bloc had skipped a meeting. Al-Maliki declared they were on extended leave and handed their portfolios for other sit-ins, ministers. Meanwhile, the UN Special Envoy Martin Kobler met with the Iraqi President Jalal Talbani and Kurdish regional leader Masoud Barzani and other senior Kurdish officials to discuss the row. And the United Nations warned on Wednesday that the thousands of Sudanese who have fled the latest wave of bloody ethnic violence in the troubled Jonglei state were in dire need of emergency aid. Gunmen burned thatched huts and looted hospitals and clinics run by Doctors Without Borders in the worst flare-up in a dispute that left 1,000 dead and thousands fleeing the nation. And on an economic front, the Egyptian stock market indices made some gains on Wednesday, the third day in 2012, amid purchasing operations among foreign investors. The benchmark EGX 30 reached 3,655.37 points, while the broader EGX index of small and medium businesses was up at 0.75%, reaching 419.48 points, and the more extended EGX 100 gained 0.34%, reaching 649.53 points. And with that, we come to the end of stories making headlines this evening, and off to the topic of this evening's debate, which is the Salafists. And how will the shape of the Egyptian parliament be? How will they govern? And more importantly, how will the relationship between the Salafists and the Muslim Brotherhood be reflected in the coming future. That and much, much more will be discussed in a few moments, so please stay with us.
One of the biggest surprises in Egypt's parliamentary elections came Salafists, members of a fundamentalist, puritanical stream of Islamism that makes the Muslim Brotherhood look moderate by comparison. In the second phase of elections, the Muslim Brotherhood's political wing, the Freedom and Justice Party, maintained its leading position, raking in more than 4 million votes. It was followed by An-Noor party of the Salafists with about 3.2 million votes. Salafists are distinguished by their insistence that politics be guided strictly by the Islamic law. An-Noor, Egypt's leading Salafist party, founded in January of this year, advocates a legal system based solely on al-Sharia, as well as Islamic principles of money transactions that prohibit taking interest. It also espouses rigid social codes. Its leaders have pushed for a complete separation of the sexes in public and condemned music of any form as contrary to Islam. The heavy turnout for Islamist parties left many observers wondering what had happened to the young, comparatively liberal protesters who filled Cairo's Tahrir Square in an 18-day popular protest that toppled long-time President Hosni Mubarak. The liberal camp is led by the Egyptian Bloc, a leftist liberal alliance including the Free Egyptians Party, which is headed by telecom tycoon Naguib Sawiris. Salafism is a revivalist movement with origins in the mid-19th century. Seeking to match the political and economic advances that followed Europe's Enlightenment, it calls for a return to the original Islamic way of life led by the first 3 generations of Muslims after the death of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Salafism was the bedrock that gave rise to the Muslim Brotherhood, though many of today's Salafists condemn the brothers for indulging in religious innovations such as participation in secular government. The Salafist school ultimately spawned the strict Wahhabi philosophy dominant in Saudi Arabia and Saudi-funded religious institutions worldwide. It was also one of the ideological forebears of jihadist groups like Al-Qaeda. From Israel's perspective, policymakers will need to determine which they consider the greater threat: a large Muslim Brotherhood bloc, reflexively hostile to Israel but still tending towards self-interested pragmatism, or a smaller Salafist camp that has consistently said it seeks to overturn Egypt's peace treaty with Israel. Support for Salafists is much deeper than anyone realized, including the Muslim Brotherhood. Even the Brotherhood was scrambling through the last month because it was suddenly concerned about the Salafists.
Welcome back. With me in the studio to shed light into this issue is a distinguished panel. With us this evening is Engineer Mustafa Zaid, Islamic activist and founder of the Muslim Anti-Defamation Coalition. With us also this evening is Mr. Ahmed Salah Hassan, leading member at An-Noor party. And with us also this evening, Mr. Ashraf Radi, journalist. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. The concern in the past was, by the West, the strong dominance of the Muslim Brotherhood, or the fact that the Muslim Brotherhood would, in any shape or format, play a role in politics. Judging by the tone that we have heard over the media and in different statements, this tone has mellowed. The policy has changed by the West. However, there is a concern which is local, and that is the strong presence of the Salafists in the upcoming Egyptian parliament. The concern is mostly about how they will be applying the Sharia, for example, which is the Islamic law, how they will be enforcing things. Statements, this concern has stemmed from statements by some of the members of some of the Salafist leaders who have come up with pretty strong statements, very strong-minded statements regarding different issues. How do you feel? I'll wrap up the comments with you since you're from that party, but I'll give the other panelists an opportunity first to voice their opinion.
Well, the Salafi movement, by definition, is going back to the roots and the authentication from the point of view of the early Muslims who were the greatest achievers in our culture. If you look at the tenets of Islamic law or Sharia law, it is very flexible. For example, at the same time that there was a famine at the state of Umar ibn Khattab in today's Saudi Arabia, where they nullified punishing anyone who steals, it was actually activated and is working fine in Egypt because they didn't have famine.
Yes.
The flexibility of looking at the necessities of people, looking for the benefits of people, the directives of the Sharia law, which is protection of money, souls, children, reason and religion and people rights, gives you the graduality that is needed to ease up the applying of the new law that is called Sharia law. We need to understand that any society, any community has a governing law. Not necessarily that everybody would agree with it, but there's a law that everybody would have to abide by it. And everybody should be concerned mainly, would it be applied fairly upon everyone, regardless of race, creed, or background, or not? So the graduality is there in Islamic law. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, إن الله رفيق يحب رفق في الأمر كله. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is gentle, kind, and He likes gentleness in everything. And this is the Prophet of Islam himself. So the fears are overblown, especially from the standpoint, this is not just a new philosophy or ideology that we're applying. This is a 1400 years of very bright history. Whenever Sharia law was applied as it should be applied, it was the highest living standard that any region in the world had seen, from Andalusia to Africa to where the Prophet, peace be upon him.
So to conclude, you don't see that there should be a concern?
No, there should be worry because a new law is about to be applied. And as we know, ideology is something, and who applies it and how effective and correct the application is a different thing.
What about methodology of application?
That's what I'm talking about. It depends on the people, it depends on the circumstances, it depends on other fluxes of opposing forces that maybe does not want that kind of success to happen in Egypt. It's a totally different thing. But inherently in Islamic law, it's a very flexible, caring, loving, tolerant law. And
why would people be concerned about how the Salafists would be applying it versus how the Muslim Brotherhood would be applying it? Because the Muslim Brotherhood has also called for the application of the Sharia.
Well,
and we should have been applying the Sharia in a lot of
I
things.
think, the main thing that I want to talk about is that Islam is the same. And yes, there's a different of, how would I say it, ideology, not about Islam itself, but how to apply it. And you can, conversation that is going on right now.
Because this is what people are concerned about. People are not against the Islamic Sharia, but they're concerned about how it will be enforced.
That's exactly the point. It would differ from a person to a person, ideology to ideology, but that is not a characteristic of the Islamic movement. For example, when you go look at the Republican Party in America or the Democratic Party or the ruling party anywhere, you're going to find shades of different political ideologies within the same supposedly direction there. So the most important thing that we have a democracy, we have an election box that we can change things every 4 years. And the greatest thing, and this is a factor that a lot of people are not looking at, specifically with the Salafi movement, we have the Quran, we have the Sunnah, we have the tradition. It's a very clear doctrine that we can always hold them to, regardless of the individual.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Dr. Ashraf.
I think there is two problems in such kind of speech. The first, the discrepancy between the speech, the kind of speech we are hearing from intellectual Salafists and Muslim brothers and the grassroots in these groups. And if I'd like to mention as the most recent application of what kind of concerns that the society will face, I can mention the Jama'at al-Amr bil-Ma'ruf wa Nahy al-Munkar, some kind of moral police severely interfering with the personal affairs of persons in that country. This is one point. The other point is that there are a lot of hypotheses.
Well, how are you relating this to the Salafists? Or are you relating it?
They are part of the Salafists.
So you're saying that this moral police is part of the Salafists?
Yeah, we have the same thing with the Muslim Brotherhood and the Party of Freedom and Justice, Al-Hurriya wal-Adala. We have two levels of speech. A speech by the leader to the foreign world, to the civil society and the civilian figures, and there are another practices at the local and the grassroots level, which is severely contradict with the moderate speech we are hearing from the leaders. And many times I asked Muslim brothers while we were in dialogue many years ago that please go right to your grassroots and try to educate them, try to tell them what you are telling us. They never did that because they want these grassroots as a reserve to apply their agenda, which mainly based on interference with the personal freedom of every citizen, because they have some specific point to the Islam, to the religious, to the religion, to the Sharia, and how should be applied. The problem with the Salafists and such ideology is that they are imposing their own interpretations, their views to Islam,
their own ideology,
and their own ideology to other people without their consent. And there are a lot of
they want to
do that.
Because they have not done it yet.
Yeah, but this is
let me be very factual, or Mr. Hassan, he will not be very happy.
And I think we must be so frank in dealing with this issue, and how can, for me, if I am believe in Sharia, the person who is obliged to apply it, the person himself. Apply the Sharia on yourself. Don't interfere with other people. Don't interfere with the public sphere. It is part of the private sphere, part of your beliefs, your deeply beliefs. And no one on the ground can impose any formula of beliefs on other people.
About the day-to-day way we conduct our lives.
Sure, they are. We have a lot of interference into personal life of everyone.
So,
and when the most recent Jamaat, Al-Amr bil-Ma'ruf, went to some people to interfere with their own daily life, there is a lot of quarrels. There are a lot of scuffles.
There has been, and I'm saying allegedly because I personally have not really delved into that, so I have to be very careful about information that goes out on air. There have been some reported incidents that this monitoring police, as you had said it, has been actually going to some individuals in different areas and asking them to do this and do that, and picked on the man of the house for not following this, or the example I read is that they knocked and said, what are you doing during the noon prayers at home? You have to go out and pray. Is this, have you heard, is this in effect?
Let me answer that question, because we have a newspaper talking with the name of Noor Party, and we said no one has ever from the party has said that. We only all of a sudden found this Jama'ah or
so you heard that this is taking place?
Yeah, they are taking place, but you can't mention or point at any name. It has no name you can refer to. This is someone is trying to say that we did this and we didn't, and we denied that.
In your party has nothing to do with it.
We are not allowed to do anything in behalf of the government. This is typically unique by government powers. We are not the government. We are just a party. We are in the parliament, just a member there. We don't have this right now. And after
Okay, let me just...
after being in the parliament.
I understand. Let me just go into one thing. This moral police, you're saying now that it has nothing to do with the Salafist movement.
Let me, yes, of course, it has nothing to do with the Salafist movement, and you have to see the history of our movement.
No, I understand this, but I want to clarify a point because this has been attributed to the Salafists.
Definitely, it has got nothing to do with Salafist movement.
Okay.
We don't know who are these people.
Okay.
This gentleman, I want him to mention one single name in this Jama'ah. He will never mention because it was never mentioned anywhere.
Just a Facebook page.
That's
why I said allegedly.
Yeah, and they want.
And since you're here, I'm asking you to.
It's the same thing. If you want to be relaxed, you want to hear from me that we're not going to do this, and I'm saying to you, we will never do this. We never did this in the past, and for 30 years, if you know this piece of information, the gentleman has to know that for 30 years we've been denying on jihad and other movements. You don't have the right to change things with your hands except with in your home or in your family, because they tried to do this with Sadat or with the community, and we are not allowed to do this.
Okay, now going back to the original point, as you had heard, people are concerned about how, once you get into the parliament, and you seem to be the second runner-up until the second phase of the elections.
Yeah.
How will you be conducting business? The image that people have had of Salafists, mostly from statements that have come from current and previous scholars and thinkers in Salafism, people think that you will do things by force. You're not a believer of democracy, because democracy in a way is the law of man, and it is against the law of, and you are a believer of the law of God. I'm saying the statements that people have been saying.
Yes.
People are concerned that you will be strictly applying Islamic Sharia with your perspective or your reading of that Sharia, which might not necessarily be how people would want to, or how people are reading it. You know, as we read any page of the Quran,
yes,
we can come out, but people feel that it's this way or no way when it comes to Salafism.
Yeah, let me talk about democracy, because democracy is a word like any other word. It has to be judged when you mix this word with speech. If I'm talking about freedom, freedom has so many meanings. If you mean by freedom that I am free to say what I want, it's a good thing, and we are allowed people to say what they want, whether in the street or everywhere. But if my freedom is conflicting with your freedom, I'm prohibited not to do whatever I want.
My freedom stops at your freedom.
All right. So
Okay.
what do you mean by freedom? This is the same thing as when you are talking about democracy. When you say about democracy is how you practice democracy in the parliaments and choosing people in the parliaments, how to make the elections, all right? And we believe it's a very good thing. But we are only denying and have problem with democracy definition when it conflicts with God's law, because in the Constitution, the second statement says that the first thing that we have to refer to is the Sharia, all right? So if I'm doing or commencing a law in the parliament that is conflicting with the Islamic Sharia, I have to review this, not to be conflicting with the Sharia. I don't have the
I don't think people are concerned about this.
Let me tell you something. I have the right to make a law that is different about the economy, about any other thing among people living, except when it conflicts with the Sharia, because we say that God has the creation and order.
Can you give us an example?
Yes.
Can you just give me a straightforward example of day-to-day things that you think no way will the Salafists compromise them?
I have an example about drinking alcohol. All right, drinking alcohol is prohibited in the Quran.
Yes.
All right. The thing is, it's not prohibited in the Quran as only. It's prohibited a lot of places in the world, even the most democracy places in the world. All right. So I'm saying.
But it is prohibited for Muslims.
Prohibited for Muslims. I'm not talking about drinking. I'm talking about manufacturing. You are responsible about manufacturing. I don't care if anyone manufacturing his own home, doing...
forget about manufacturing. What about importing?
No, you are responsible, sorry. You are responsible about manufacturing. This is the problem. We don't care about people drinking alcohol in their home or bringing it from outside or anything, all right?
What about hotels serving alcohol? I mean, you have tourists coming to Egypt. This is our bread and butter tourism.
Yes.
When they come and stay at a five-star hotel, they're expecting to have a nice dinner by the Nile, have a glass of wine, whatever. Will you be prohibiting five-star hotels, for example, from serving alcohol to non-Egyptians and to non-Muslims, Egyptians that are non-Muslims,
Yes,
for example?
Let me ask the main conflict between liberals and Islamists about this question. The question is, first let's ask ourselves, what does Allah or God says about that matter?
As a Muslim, I understand what you're saying, but as a non-Muslim, I cannot relate to what you're saying.
Let me tell you something.
First imposed by anyone else.
The gentleman talked about the misinterpretation about words and phrases in the Quran. All right?
No, I don't misinterpret. I can claim that you are misinterpreting the
all right.
Quran.
All right. We have a very clear ayah in the Quran. It says that إنما الخمر والأنصاب والأزلام رجس من عمل الشيطان فاجتنبوه. We consider this
who
is
is
an order.
Yes, I understand. Who is this referring to in this verse in the Quran? It is addressing who?
Addressing
Muslims.
The public.
Public.
The public.
Muslims.
The public.
The public.
Because if I allow a non-Muslim or any foreigner to go publicly and promote alcoholism in my society, that fixes me as a Muslim and it fixes everyone. The same way that in America...
What do you mean by promote? If I'm sitting in a restaurant having a glass of wine, how is that promoting?
I'll tell you in a second. The same way in America, let's say in New York State, you cannot carry an alcohol bottle openly in the public. It has to be covered in a bag. No one is allowed to see it.
By law.
In the country of freedom, by law. Otherwise, you're going to be fined. You and the store who sold it to you.
Exactly.
So
but there are places where you can
exactly.
drink.
Exactly. So personal freedom is totally different. Manufacture alcohol. You want to destroy your liver in the privacy of your home? Go right ahead.
What
but don't go
about
out there and promote.
That's what I'm saying. What you're saying can be related to by a Muslim, because I have read the Quran and I know what my rights are and what God has asked me to do as a good Muslim. But I'm talking here as a foreigner, as a non-Muslim. Why will you be enforcing
Exactly. I'll tell you exactly in
this
details.
is the concern.
I'll tell you exactly in details. Here's how it's going to go. You're a foreigner. You love alcohol. Bring your entire luggage filled with nothing but whiskey. We'll allow you to go through the airport. Drink as much as you want in the privacy of your room.
But in the hotel, I cannot order.
Exactly. Number one. Number two, you're a non-Muslim. Manufacture it, squeeze it, do whatever you want to do with it in the privacy of your home. Do not offer it to Muslims. Do not show it to Muslims. Period. And this is not me being a Muslim. This is the law of the land. Every country would have different laws. Every country assumes and proves that this is a very dangerous practice. It destroys people's health. It is conducive for a lot of domestic violence, of committed crimes, and so on and so forth. Where the line is drawn, it differs from an ideology and a country to a country. We have a law, that is the law of God, that draws a line that is applicable upon everyone equally.
Okay. The same, would it be applied to other issues such as the dress code, the bank work, for example?
How much time do we have in this episode?
Not much.
Tell me how much or pick and choose.
Not much, but I'm saying with this, because, I mean, what I'm hearing from you is that there's no negotiation about something like alcohol, for example. Will we achieve...
No, actually, there is. This is the final form of the law, but graduality is an essence of things, especially about alcohol. Alcohol itself, in the Quran as prohibited as it was.
I understand.
It was gradual because it's an addiction matter. So we have that alternative.
Engineer
How to
Zaid, I
phase into
understand
that.
this, but
I'm
I'm
talking
saying
about the final form.
I'm talking about when it comes to other issues,
Yes.
which are issues that touch the day-to-day lives of individuals.
Very good question. Let me answer
Will
that.
you be applying the same, I mean, according to Salafists, for example,
Yes.
women are supposed to wear a veil or supposed to have a certain dress code.
Yes.
This is mentioned in the Quran.
Yes.
If I opt not to wear it, what are you going to do?
A good question. I'm going to answer it, but first let us talk about respecting the law of the country. I have to respect the America's law. In Islam, I have the right to marry from 2 or 3 or 4 women, all right? I'm not allowed to do this because
If you live in America.
if you live in America, I'm not allowed to do this. I have to respect their law.
But even in Islam, there are preconditions to that. So let's not propagate
Whatever, I'm not
multiple
doing-
marriages because there are preconditions. Let's not propagate something because
This is the first decision by
let's
the
continue
people
the
in
rest
India.
of the verse.
She's watching right there.
وَعْدِلُوا وَلَنْ تَعْدِلُوا. So let us continue the verse.
All right, all right.
It was the first decision by the Libyan government and the majority of Muslim, like-minded Muslims. We're very, very happy to listen to such kind of decision. The new government in Libya abolished a previous code, personal code, and allowed people to marry from more than women. On the other hand, we have in Tunisia another version of Islam which allowed them from Islamic perspective, from Islamic interpretation, to restrict the right of a man to marry
Multiple marriages.
Yes.
Yeah, but both countries now are allowing them to do this. They were not allowed in the past, now they are allowing because both countries
Tunisia
are
didn't-
following Sharia of
didn't,
Islam and they
Tunisia didn't.
You're talking about
mandated...
Ben Ali's
Well,
laws.
the woman,
No.
the first wife's consent is required. So,
All right,
or is
let's
this not in the Quran?
Let's not get distracted with this.
Answering, anyhow, if I'm doing this,
So
I'm not doing
when
it
you're
at
in
the same.
Rome, you do as the Roman. You have to
I'm-
respect law, and
I'm
we
not.
understand this. But I'm
Alright?
saying, in application of
Yes.
other issues such as the dress
a good
code, for
question
example.
about the dress code that we have been for 30 years or Ikhwan for 80 years, the philosophy of inviting people to Islam is about inviting. We are not enforcing people to do this. So we've been doing this in the past, and we will still be doing this in the future because we found that telling people or asking the people to do this, believing in the dress code or believing in the veil or believing on to be in that way will be so much stronger if I enforce her to do this, all right? If I'm doing this, other countries that may be telling they are following Sharia of Islam, just when she come out of the airplane, she left the veil. We don't want this. We want...
So you will not be enforcing a dress code?
No, of course. We
What
will not.
about the swimsuit? Because the statements that came from some of
the swimsuit?
They call
scholars...
that indecent exposure, and it's a punishable offense in many
Because,
there is a law
Sheikh
called...
Hazem Abu Ismail said if he sees a woman walking on the beach with a swimsuit, he will order her immediate arrest.
Let me tell you something. In immediate arrest in a time, as a Salafist or Hezbollah,
What do you mean by in a time?
in a certain, not now, in somewhere in the
Sometime in the future,
50
when
we
we
have
are
to
ready to
before
years
doing this, let us agree that is it allowed for a woman to walk in the street with the swimsuit or not?
She's not walking in the street, she's walking on the beach.
That I'm the same person
All right,
looking at her. I didn't change. I'm the same man looking at her. In both
Why
cases.
go to the beach if you don't want to look at
No, but
people
what I'm
dressed in
saying,
swimsuits?
okay,
Let me tell you, is
if I
it
just so happen
allowed
to
or
see
not
her
allowed?
there or here,
I have a
The
and it's
question
morally
is-
acceptable, I'm the same man.
I have a question.
So what
The
you're
question
saying
is it allowed or not?
it's personal freedom. That's what we're getting at. Will you be respecting this personal
you have,
freedom?
you even very good.
It's not personal. The street is not
You have-
personal.
you-
The street is never personal.
No.
The beach is never personal.
No, beaches are personal.
Inside your home.
No, beaches are personal.
Let me tell you
In
something.
America, in America,
Is
in America,
to give
in
a
Europe.
blind eye for this for
in
this
America,
woman
if
or that woman.
walks, she would be immediately arrested.
By the beach?
Where?
Not by the beach. But I'm saying if she walks like that in the street.
Well, people, we're not talking about females dressed in a swimsuit
Who is telling that?
Let me finish my statement. If a woman wears 2 pieces bikini and walks in most of the streets in Europe, specifically in America, she would be arrested immediately, not by Sheikh Hazem Salah Abu Ismail, by any cop.
We're not talking about people walking down the street.
Let me finish.
There is a place for everything.
Let me finish.
He will give you the answer.
By a cop or a police officer because it's called indecent
Exposure. But that's because she's walking down the street.
We have to understand that as a country, as a sovereign country, we have the right to determine where the line lies. In Islam, it's very easy. When you bring your personal freedom to be imposed on the public, you see everybody's talking about us imposing upon people. The woman that walks around naked, the person who want to be a drug addict or drinking alcohol wide open, he's imposing a certain behavior upon the public, upon children, other people.
The
You
other
have
side,
to draw the line somewhere.
the other side of the coin is saying that you are imposing your way of thinking on them.
But again, when you talk about running a country, you have to draw the line somewhere. If it is a private beach, if it is a private place where only women are there, she can wear whatever she want to do.
What do you mean by a private beach? Most of the beaches in the North Coast, for example, they're private beaches.
No, I'm talking private for women. So it's a
So
woman
you're
only beach.
enforcing a certain code.
Segregated.
Yeah, everywhere there's a code that has to be enforced. In the jungle, in the tribal jungle, there's always a code. There's always a law. In America, there's a law. In Israel, there's a law. Everywhere
So
there's a law that has
people's-
to be applicable upon people.
So this leads down or funnels down to one thing. People's concern that there is no negotiation, that it's this way or no way.
There's always negotiation.
Where's the negotiation?
Let me tell you the negotiation.
How we
you are
apply
offering?
that, how
What
we phase
kind of
into that.
Excuse me, Mustafa, let me tell you something. In another way, we see that banking, riba, what's the meaning of
interest-bearing.
the interest, it's prohibited by Islam. We cannot do this if we have to change things. We cannot do this right away. All right, it has to take a lot of years, and we can't say that this is prohibited. So all the people has to take their
So
money from the
eventually
banks.
all the foreign banks would leave.
There are other opinions in Islam.
It will drop the
Can I
economy.
say something?
It's just like someone has a problem addicting morphine. If morphine is prohibited, I cannot withdraw immediately this.
So this is what you're going to be doing to the public, giving them a small dose until
it's not a
they
condition,
confirm.
small doses. It has to be called treatment. So this is the difference about treatment or small doses, and this has to be determined in the parliament and the negotiation you're asking
When you
for.
say treatment, you're going back to what some people are concerned of, and that is you will be imposing your ideology.
Any country
Let me
imposes
tell you
its own
something.
law.
This is the
Tell
problem.
me-
Is it my...
I think there is
Tell me about
no
one
fear
country
in
that does not impose
distributing
its own
words.
law.
I have a question, and I have a comment on what I have. My comment is that we still have a very insisting effort by the Salafists and Islamists to impose their own interpretation of the society in the name of we are applying
Mustafa,
law.
tell me one country in the world that is not imposing the law.
I'll tell you.
One
Only
single-
single
there is
not allowed to impose
limits.
the law.
One-
There is
one
limits.
single
There is
country.
limits to
Who
law.
puts
There
the
is
limits?
limits.
Who puts the
Just
limits?
mention a country.
There is limits to law. The limits to law is
The lawbreakers.
the individual rights and individual freedom.
Do whatever you want in the privacy of your home.
Any interference in this freedom and the freedom of choice, especially the freedom
Do you
of the people, is prohibited now according to the physical rights and human rights of every.
The question is, do you have the right?
individual.
Do you have the right to be naked in the street in America? Do you have the right this? It's your own
You're
freedom.
not drawing a fair comparison.
It's your own freedom. You are free to do it.
No. We're not drawing a fair comparison because there's a place and a time for everything. So
Your freedom depends on two things: the public morals of the society, and I
this is
think
what we're saying.
everyone will respect the public moral in the society which he is living in. As you have mentioned,
Absolutely.
If
We
you are in
this is-
America,
this is
you
what
will-
we're talking about.
we
you will
have to
not-
take a short
you will
break.
oblige yourself
There's
by
a
not
break.
to marry.
We have to take a
another
short
woman.
break,
Yeah.
and we'll be
But-
right back
okay.
after this. Please
But
hold
I
your
have a
thoughts.
question here.
We'll start off with
Okay.
your question. We'll have a short break, and we'll be right back after this, so please stay with us.
This has long feared the advent of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, but the parliament and even worse, a group of Islamists surging, the Salafists. Nearly one-fourth of Egyptians voted for the group whose Puritanism makes the Brotherhood look moderate. The Muslim Brotherhood is not a moderate group, but it appears reformist when compared to the Salafists. Whereas the Brotherhood embraces elections, the Salafists are hostile to the very concept of voting. The Brotherhood is pragmatic and aware of political constraints, whereas the Salafists have no qualms about expressing their desire to turn Egypt into an Islamic state. The success of the Salafists is particularly terrifying because they are honest about their objectives. Some supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood are misled about the group's ideology. All of the Salafist supporters know what they are asking for when voting. The Salafists regularly call for closing movie theaters, gender segregation, creating a morality police, stoning adulterers, severing the hands of thieves, and banning alcohol and fornication. They see that citizenship, freedom, and equality are restricted by Islamic Sharia, which is obligatory. Although they have doctrinal differences about the role of religion and politics, the Muslim Brotherhood and Salafists want to see an Islamic regime in Egypt. The West has long feared the advent of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, but the first round's election results released showed an even worse group of Islamists surging. Nearly one-fourth of Egyptians voted for the group whose Puritanism makes the Brotherhood look moderate. The Muslim Brotherhood's political experience has made it more pragmatic while working toward its long-term goal to make Egypt more Islamic. It has indicated that it wants to be part of the centrist coalition sharing the heavy burden of the country's difficult economic and social problems. Differences between the Brotherhood and the Salafists have given hope to liberals that they may have more influence on a post-election government and efforts to draw up a new constitution. In fact, the political Salafist trend in Egypt has changed its attitude and ideas since the 25th of January revolution as a result of the pressure of the public and street.
Welcome back. Gentlemen, to recap, and then I'll get you, I said I promised that you would be starting with a question. To recap, it's a matter of you will be doing things gradually. This is what I sensed from
some other things might not be done at all.
yeah, but mostly for the
we are
issues
talking about
of
the most important things that will be done gradually.
Graduality is a very open option for us. That is.
So you will not be shocking our
No,
system.
so depending on the situation, the most important thing is that we care for people. People are safe, they feel secure, they feel free, they have their privacy, and then the law is applicable fairly upon everyone.
You have a question, go ahead.
My question is that about the legislation, the laws that will be put down by an Islamist majority in the parliament. If we have another scenario after 4 years from now, that a liberal parties and civilian political parties came to power, when they start to change these laws, I think you will have a lot of objections because they are changing the rules of Islam, the rule of Sharia, and they will declare them as infidel and warring God and His Prophet. I think if we are talking about democracy, from A to Z, democracy is about people, and people who have the right to legislate themselves without interfering the matter of religion, which is a private belief for everyone, and the freedom of belief is enshrined in Islam itself and in any other religion. There is no any kind of imposition of belief on any person. What will be the situation then? It will be a war between Islam and non-Islam. It will be some kind of another, as we have seen in Afghanistan, as we have seen in other states which applied Sharia, and when other government came to power and decided that it was wrong, it has a lot of mischiefs, it has a lot of errors, it has a lot of problems for the society, and it's time to change it. I think the problem is starting from here. And I think this is contradicting with your speech about graduality. Your graduality is imposed on a very deep assumption that you will stay in power for a very, very long time. And I don't think so, because politics is different, and change in democracies is the name of the game at the moment all over the world. Will you accept that? Will you accept changing laws, rules, legislations, even if you consider these changes contradict with the Sharia and with the God rule?
All right, can I answer? All right. Real quick. Using that erroneous logic, we shouldn't write any constitution, because they're going to be a next election and they're going to change it, so why write it to begin with?
Why are you assuming that you will be writing the constitution?
No, but I'm talking about as a society. No society should write a constitution then, because 6 years later...
We have a constitution.
I didn't interrupt you. I didn't interrupt you. Then we're not going to do that. Let's take examples. And the liberals always like to tell us, you know what, all the world is doing this, that, but the Salafi is different. The U.S. Constitution, the beacon of democracy of the world, was written once in 1789. It was never changed, not one word. There's something called amendments. They amended it 27 times on a need-to basis.
We have amended the Constitution numerous times. And I think this is causing an allergy now when you say amend.
This is the norm.
Okay.
At the certain time of history of any nation, when a constitution is written, it's written by the majority of the people at the time, according to the conditions and the guidelines and the goals of that time. For example, I'll go back to the American Constitution. 55 representatives, 55, all white, all land owning, and they voted not all by majority, as they try to that everyone should write it and everyone should agree, and only over two-thirds gave it that, hey, the go-ahead. Actually, it was written by one man, that's James Madison, the Virginian document, which was fed a little bit by the New Jersey document, and that's how the American Constitution that we should take a model was born. The Constitution should be written today by the majority of the people that the Egyptian people had chosen. If need to change it later on, it doesn't matter.
No,
you see, democracy has to have one inherent thing that we all need to agree about it, all right? Generic fallacy cannot be used, meaning that I agree on this as long as it's coming from you, but it's the same thing comes from him and I don't like him, it cannot work. So if it comes from the Salafi, voting or whatever law that is, or because it's related to God or not, then we should not agree with it. But if it comes from someone who does not care about anything or whatever it is, or agree with him, then that's acceptable. The majority of the American people, and let's call us the American people if you allow us to be, then...
We're not the American people.
No, I mean, if we... Okay. I was talking about the reference of the...
Because we never liked their ideology and their...
What I'm talking as a reference...
means of imposing their version of democracy.
Because I was just talking about the American Constitution. The Egyptian people...
Who wrote the American Constitution?
James Madison.
James I.
Yeah.
If you have the guarantee, if you will give us the guarantees that the American Constitution is giving...
You who?
As Egyptian individuals...
You who? You said give us. Us represents who? You who? You individually or the Egyptian people?
Every citizen.
Who you think 75% of the parliament is?
In this country, every person has a right.
Who you think 75% of the Egyptian parliament is?
Majority. It is a matter of very, very basic rights of individuals. If you give the people...
Which individuals?
Why don't you talk about the majority? Why don't you talk about the majority? Why don't you talk about the majority?
23 million Egyptian people have voted.
The majority is a matter of how can we steering the government business. It isn't a matter of basic rights and individual rights of every citizen in the country.
Who
If
determines
you have,
you or the Egyptian people? That's the basic question.
You are
He is
speaking,
part of the Egyptian people.
But he's not the Egyptian people. The Egyptian people are the parliament. That's what they want to acknowledge.
No, the
They're
parliament is not the
they're not.
Egyptian people.
Then what kind of
The
democracy we're
parliament
in?
is representative to, in a very short and limited mandate from some part of the Egyptian people.
So if the Egyptian parliament decides right and you want to decide left, how will we go about it?
It is a matter of legislation.
I'm not
and
talking about
this
matters.
legislation is
I'm not talking about
open
matters.
for changing.
It's
It is a
very
matter
specific.
of laws.
The Egyptian parliament
Constitution is a
decided A.
different issue. The Constitution should have, if you give the Egyptian people
Who made
the
that a
same
rule?
guarantees.
Who made that a rule? You made that. You made that
the
rule.
American Constitution is given to the American citizens, and under these guarantees, every Islamist who is discriminated in this country is going there and living to benefit from the freedom there.
Yes.
If you are ready to do that in that country, I may agree with you. But the problem that you are insisting on imposing your interpretations, your views, and depriving people from their own and basic
Where did you
rights
get that from?
in the name of Islam.
Where did you get that from? You just made that up. Where did you get that from? Who said that?
Who?
I didn't say that.
Who?
Islam does not say that. Where did you
No,
do that from?
you are saying that now.
Where?
You are saying it.
Where?
When you are that constitution shouldn't be changed and making
did I
fallacy-
say
and
constitution
making
should not be
false-
changed?
making false comparisons between the American Constitution and the Constitution you are planning to put and to
Gentlemen,
enforce on the
can we move?
people.
We
I
have
think
to.
there is a
We
problem
have to
here.
wrap up.
I think there is a problem.
We have to wrap up because the issue of the constitution. Now that's an issue that will take shows and
There is
shows.
a very important issue
ahead.
in 2 minutes that the most important conflict that we're talking about, you just mentioned, is that religion is a private belief. We don't believe it.
You don't
the
believe that
religion
I am
is
believe
not
in that, and I'm
it-
Muslim,
voted
and
that
you
way.
don't have the right.
Voted that way.
Let me talk. I didn't interrupt you. All right?
Okay, let's go.
Yeah, the religion is not only a private belief. Private belief is part of the Sharia or the Deen, but the Deen is more than only private belief. Sharia is something from God's.
An ideology and a way of life.
Yeah, is to maintain your life in the right way. So he's giving rules and he has orders for the sake of the people to walk in the right direction, just like the Martian sine waves, all right? If there is a rule, I mentioned that before, that God has the creation and the order. You are telling me that God has only creation and he hasn't got the order. Do you believe that God has the right to order or not? This is the question. I want your answer. I want your answer.
I may answer. I think the answer is very clear in the Quran.
Yes.
And because of that, the final judgment will be for God, not for you. Not for you. You are putting yourself
We're not
in the
talking
seat
about
of
your
God.
hearts.
Not
Not
by
about your heart.
saying that you are putting yourself in the seat of
One
God.
second, please. Well, just one short
We
sentence.
have to wrap up.
Exactly.
They're screaming out there.
What about the British democracy, the oldest democracy in Europe? Here it is, the coronation of the King of England. This is what he has to say to be crowned as the King of England. Protection of the law of God, the profession of the gospel, and the Protestant church as reformed by the law. Do that, and then we'll
You
talk
are
later.
very versed
I'm
into
disputing
American
that.
politics.
I said
Yes.
Well, I can sense that a good chunk of your education maybe
Yes.
took place in the United States. Was this also where you believed in the Salafist movement?
I am a
Or
Muslim.
when I'm a Muslim as well.
Yeah, sure. I'm a conservative Muslim. I'm a
Let's not
conservative
start
Muslim
saying I'm a
before-
Muslim and you're a Muslim. We're all Muslims,
To
but
the shocking
maybe
of-
our ideologies are
To the
different.
shocking of some, I was a conservative Muslim before. I became more conservative and more believing in Sharia law when I saw with my own eyes the devastation of man-made laws. Europe is collapsing before our eyes because of riba right now. The interest rate in the U.S. for 2 years is 0. That's the Islamic way,
So
and that's the only
when you lived within the Western
Yes.
hemisphere,
I knew really why
This is-
Islamic law is Islamic law.
this is when you
Yes.
felt that you believe more in this ideology.
Yes, because I've seen it practically.
That's because I'm just saying this because I see you very well versed into the American politics. I have to wrap up, and unfortunately our time is up, and unfortunately I have not managed to put a good squeeze, especially on
But we're glad that Ashraf is inviting us for dinner after this.
a lot is squeezed out of him. We have not
that. I think, I think discussion shouldn't stop here, I think.
So I will invite you again to join us again to shed more light into the Salafists and maybe the Islamist ideologies, how they will work in the upcoming parliament, and especially how will the Salafists and the Muslims and the Muslim Brotherhood work side by side, now that the Muslim Brotherhood seems very much liberal by comparison to the Salafists, so to speak. At least on media, they have exercised more liberalism, so to speak. Gentlemen, again, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us this evening. Wish you the very best of luck in future endeavors. Hope to see you again soon. And to you, the viewers, wishing you a very pleasant evening. Tomorrow, another day and another debate. And on that note, good night.